Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Brian Bride, our Director of Payroll Operations. Brian, tell me, what's kind of different now that the Big Beautiful Bill Act is in place? It's kind of been going. I know we've had a podcast before about tips and overtime. I know that things haven't changed, but what are we kind of seeing that's happening?
Yeah, sure. So before we talked about what we thought would happen, and now the IRS is actually given the guidance. So we're just going to kind of go over that to make sure that
They have enough employees to give guidance.
They do. Yeah. Not anymore, but when the guidance came out, they did. So we kind of talked about how the W-2s weren't changing. That came out pretty quickly. But there's a couple of things that we need to talk about. So one, the tax on overtime and tips isn't permanent. It's only 25 through 28.
So the length of the presidency.
Correct.
Okay.
So, that's why they didn't do anything for 25. So if you're somebody that buys your own W-2s, you're going to have a new W-2 next year. Don't buy too many, because then 29 will probably be different unless they extended, right? So you never know. So that's one of the things that we're doing here. We got to make sure we don't overbuy W-2s. Mm-hmm. There's a new IRS form. It's called Schedule 1A. So one thing about this is a lot of folks that, not necessarily overtime, but a lot of folks that get paid tips, they're usually pretty vanilla returns in general. So filling out a schedule isn't something that they're really used to. So we're going to kind of go over that, like what that looks like. And then, the W-2s for 2025 are not changing. So the other thing is, the IRS sent out, the customarily received tips list of occupations.
Okay.
So, just because you got a tip one time doesn't mean that you can write that money off if you even declared it. So it's people that customarily get tips, right? Your restaurants, your stylists, your barbers. If you go to the IRS website, it's like 500 occupations.
Oh, geez.
So there's a bunch on there that I'm not even sure what some of them are. But, if you get tips, like I would say if you had like a credit card receipt and it says, add tip here, you'd probably be able to write some of that off.
Okay.
Right. Now it is deducted 25,000. So if somebody is a server at maybe a high-end restaurant, they're probably getting up really close to that. If maybe you're the to-go person, maybe you're not going to be able to write that much off.
Yeah. Like if you're just doing this a couple days a week and just driving off, that's not going to hit it. It's
above the line deduction. So what it does is reduces your taxable wages. So it doesn't reduce your tax, right? So you have something like a tax credit that reduces your tax. So like the most popular tax credit is the child tax credit, right? If you owe $2,000 and you have a child, you owe $0. This isn't a tax credit. This is deduction. So, if you made $50,000 and 20,000 tips, that's $30,000 that you made. Okay. So it can be substantial, but if you make $80,000 and you made $100 in tips, not going to really help.
It's not moving the needle.
Not going to move the needle, right? Yeah. So the other part is the overtime pay. So overtime pay is, depending, maybe you're a union and you make a lot of overtime pay, right?
Okay.
Or your construction, maybe you're not union, but you work Saturdays in the summertime, something like that. So it's about the premium too. So that's the tricky part that a lot of people are going to make a mistake on. So let's say you make $20 an hour and you work 1 hour overtime, you would make $30 an hour. Well, you don't get to take $20 or $30 off on your taxes. You go and take $10 off.
$10. So the overtime piece, not premium. Your base pay.
Right. So that's going to be harder to determine on a paycheck, right? So if you have your check at the end of the year and you just make, time and a half for overtime, it's not going to be a problem. You take your last check, you'll be able to see your overtime pay on that deducted. If you work in a state like California that has daily overtime, unless you've actually worked over 40 hours in that week, that daily overtime doesn't count. So let's say you work 35 hours, but one day you work 10, that 2 hours of overtime you got paid in California, you can't deduct that.
Oh, okay.
So that could be tougher depending on what state you're in. So the Schedule 1C is where you put your tips and overtime. Now, this is only for federal income, not state income tax, not Social Security, not Medicare. You pay the full amounts on those.
So literally this is just the Fed.
Just the federal. Yep. And so there is a box on your W-2 if you get tips. It's box 7. It says Social Security tips. Mm-hmm. That's probably your best bet for filling out your Schedule 1A. So you can look at your paycheck stub and it should match at the end, your W-2 and your paycheck stub. But that box is box 7, says Social Security tips. Those are tips that you got paid that you'd be able to write off in your Schedule 1A. The other part is overtime, which is a little bit trickier. So overtime, we kind of went over some of the rules. So one thing for overtime you can do is just divide by 3. So if you get regular time and a half and overtime, you divide by 3, it's going to give you just the premium that you can write off. If you're in a union or you have other different overtime rules and you're in a state that gives like daily overtime, like California or Alaska, you're going to have to calculate that like separately. So that can be kind of tough.
Brian, my big thing, because we've discussed this before. I've had some time to sit on it. For so many of these specifically tipped employees, it doesn't seem like it's something they even really want to do to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it can add a little extra to your tax return. If you file your own on TurboTax or whatever, I'm sure it'll help you out along the way, right? If you go to a tax professional, I don't know if they'll charge you extra. If your tips, I think with the box 7, it's going to be pretty straightforward for you to take that amount off. Now, how much will it help you? I don't know. Everybody's tax situation is different. Right. But if you're a part-time person that makes some tips on the side, I don't know how much it's going to reduce your income to be that effective. But it is still something you can write off.
I want to nail down the numbers because we talked about it before, and I feel like it's really, really helpful for people to hear. So where are kind of the sweet spots where they're going to feel this benefit? So if I am a tipped employee, where are the numbers that I'm like, hey, this is going to benefit me? Yeah.
So if you're like a tipped employee and maybe you work at a restaurant in a big city, right? And you're a highly tipped employee, like some of those wait staff at
a bougie steak restaurant,
like at a steak house,
yep.
You're making $125,000 a year. I've seen that before. I've actually had a former client at a former service bureau. They had servers that worked really big, like parties, and they were making over $200,000 in tips a year. So I've seen it. It's rare. So if you are, maybe a bartender downtown, okay, right, and you're making $100K plus, and your tips, you'll be around $25,000. That's quite a substantial amount of money to save. Maybe if you're a server part-time, a high school student, I don't think you're even owe any taxes, right? So it's somebody that makes, $75,000 to $100,000. You're writing off $25,000, which is 25% or more.
That's
right?
pretty darn good.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
Overtime would be somebody that's non-union that works overtime, because some of the union laws, it's not going to fall under this, right? Unless you work over 40 hours in a week, you can't write it off. So a lot of unions, you make overtime over 8. So, and then that a lot of times you're working 4 days, right? It's pretty common. I've seen that. So that one, you're probably going to have to, the union's probably going to give you some advice on that, how to write off that overtime. But like maybe you're somebody who does construction and you're working, Monday through Friday and Saturdays, and that's a 6 of your salary. You're probably going to be able to write some of that overtime off. So yeah, when you hear it, it sounds really great. But when you start looking at some of the numbers, so I don't know how many people that helps, right? So we'll know after the first time people file, how many people fill it out.
Might give them a little kick. That's about it. But again, kind of wrapping this all up. So part-timers that are tipped, really not going to feel this at all.
Right.
Maybe they'll see a couple extra $100.
Right.
But again, this all has to be done, I don't want to say carefully, but they have to stay on top of their tips. Like you got to keep track the numbers the whole time. And then for the overtime, not that they don't keep track of it, the employer would keep track of their overtime, but it has to be over the 40 hours per week.
Correct.
And it's only, very only, the money that you got paid in overtime, not your base salary.
Correct.
Cool. Anything else we should talk about with this?
No, I mean, if you're highly tipped or you have a little overtime, you don't do taxes by yourself, this might be a good year to reach out to a professional. But if you have pretty basic, I think anyone TurboTax, something like that, would probably be well-versed for you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.